undertaken within their core constitutional powers. And there's much we can learn about what to expect from this new Trump term as the transition moves forward and as the outlines of the new administration begin to take shape. Trump and his team have already announced more than 24 people that they expect to join his incoming administration, and the list includes a number of controversial cabinet picks, all of whom would traditionally be subject to a confirmation process by the Senate, which could be the first true tests of Trump's power and influence over the incoming Republican-controlled Congress. So far, Trump has tapped Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, despite the fact that the ex-congressman was recently the subject of a federal criminal investigation led by the Department of Justice, which he would lead. That investigation did not lead to any charges, and Gaetz has denied any wrongdoing, but his inexperience and his past scandals remain an obstacle to his confirmation. Trump's pick for Secretary of Defense, Fox News host and military veteran Pete Hegseth, is also facing opposition given his lack of experience in any sort of senior command role or in managing a large organization or in managing a tiny operation, as well as his vocal support of a trio of service members who had either been convicted or charged with war crimes. Trump's other eyebrow-raising picks include Robert F. Kennedy Jr., an anti-vaxxer who has been tapped to head America's main public health agency, and the former Democratic Congresswoman turned Republican Tulsi Gabbard, who could be the director of national intelligence and has been accused of echoing Kremlin propaganda. These picks have been likened to a shock and awe campaign that's meant to unsettle bureaucrats and civil servants across all levels of government, causing some of them to quit, as Trump and his allies vow to make good on their promise to gut the entire federal government of the so-called deep state. But these controversial choices also set up an early test for the incoming Republican-controlled Senate, which ordinarily would be tasked with vetting and confirming Trump's nominees. But Trump wants them to give up their constitutionally guaranteed right to advise and consent on his nominations, and at least some Republicans seem to be okay with that. Trump has called for the Senate to allow him to make recess appointments, which would essentially allow him to install anybody he wants to various positions across the government without having to subject those appointees to the normal vetting or confirmation process. Those people could stay in office in cabinet positions until the next Congress is sworn in, not the one that's coming in January, the one that's coming in 2 years from January, which means they could technically stay in their position for up to 2 years without Senate confirmation. Since he launched his first campaign for president, Trump has the rise of authoritarianism in the world we've made. Ben, thank you for being here. You're an important person to talk to because of your government experience, because you've studied this and you've written a book about it. So I wanted to sort of bring you in to talk to my viewers about looking at this list of potential appointees, the list of people Trump has chosen to join his administration with questionable backgrounds like Matt Gaetz and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. Now he's asking the Senate to give up advice and consent. What's your take on how this is unfolding?
Well, Ali, I think one of the useful things to do in this context is to almost think about the United States as if you were looking at it from the outside in. You know, like we're so accustomed to certain norms in this country that we are losing sight of the fact that what is happening here is the kind of state capture that has happened in other democracies around the world, where we've seen right-wing nationalists, populist autocrats take power and kind of methodically remake the government in their own image. And that's what's happening here. Trump learned from his first term in office. If you compare the appointments, in his first term, he didn't really know almost all of the people. He pointed to some of the key positions that you're pointing to. Jim Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, conventional views as a longtime general. Rex Tillerson, a businessman, tapped to be Secretary of State. The National Security Advisor became H.R. McMaster in 2017, another general he didn't know particularly well. John Kelly, who was his Secretary of Homeland Security. Those people aren't here this time. None of those people are here this time, because those are not people that would do whatever he wanted. And so what you have here is a mix of people, some of whom with more conventional resumes, like Marco Rubio, but even a Rubio is someone who's completely remade himself into a MAGA devotee. He's communicated in his public actions and his private, I'm sure, communications with Trump, that he'll carry out whatever order is given. And then you have people like a Matt Gaetz or a Tulsi Gabbard or a Hegseth at DOD who are there to wreck those agencies. They want there to be a mass exodus of civil servants. They want there to be kind of chaos. They actually probably want there to be a big fight over whether these people are appropriate because they're going to go after the quote unquote deep state. This is what he wants. He wants to remake the government in the image of MAGA. He wants to empty out the civil service and agencies he doesn't like the Department of Justice, that he has a vendetta against. And, he wants to have free reign to do whatever he wants as president of the United States. And frankly, there's not a lot of guardrails to prevent him from doing that.
Right. In the first term, we used to talk to some people about why they were doing it on or off the record. And they'd say, well, my country needs me. Or, these are people who will be guardrails around Trump. They'll keep him from his worst impulses. Now that that's gone, that doesn't lessen the responsibility for the rest of us who are not in government, but it can be unmotivating. So what do you say to people who are feeling like, I don't have this fight in me? I don't want to keep going. I don't even know what keeping going looks like in this environment. You said look at from the outside in. I talked to Maria Ressa in the last hour, and it was pretty encouraging because she talks about it from, the Philippines and their perspective. What do you say to people right now? Because I'm sure people are asking you this.
Yeah, people are. And first of all, just to put a point on it, the Supreme Court is different than it was 8 years ago. The Republicans in Congress are different. He's remade those institutions in his own image, too. So there's this lack of guardrails, right, that can be very demoralizing to people. And frankly, I don't think that the answer is to kind of rerun the playbook from 2017, when a lot of the Democratic messaging or the kind of quote unquote resistance messaging was about what an interloper Donald Trump is, what an outsider he is, how much he doesn't belong at the center of power. He is the center of power. He is the new establishment in this country, him and Elon Musk. I think that what that has to say to the rest of us, people can be demoralized. This is not forever. This is not forever. There's a midterm election in 2 years. Donald Trump is term limited in 4 years. Something is going to emerge on the back end of this. I don't believe that Donald Trump's going to somehow magically change the Constitution and at age 82, stay in power forever. That is not something that is easily within his grasp. And so the message for us is, okay, yes, there are some immediate steps that need to be taken to protect vulnerable people. I think state governments, we live in a big, complicated, sprawling federal republic. A lot of powers are at the municipal and state level, and a lot can be done by Democratic governors, Republican governors who maybe don't like this, or people at the local and community level as well. At the same time, I think that there are checks in terms of public opinion, there are checks in terms of protest, there are checks in terms of journalism. All those things can kind of hold a line of truth and reality in the midst of the blizzard of disinformation and misinformation and activity that we're going to get from Trump. But at the same time, I think we have to be building back a different alternative that the Democrats have not done in the last 8 years about what is a different form of populism. What is a different criticism of the manipulation and corruption of power? Because we're going to see plenty of it over the next few years here, so that we're prepared to seize that opportunity when there are elections again in 1 year and 2 years and 4 years.
You are a government official. You were a senior advisor. You also have a role in the media. You've got a very important podcast. You're a contributor for us. You write a lot. Let's talk about particularly the attack on the Fourth Estate and journalism and journalists. Steve Bannon sent out a message that named us here at MSNBC and said, keep your records, we're coming after you. Kash Patel, we don't know whether he's getting a position in the government or not, has said very specifically they will come after journalists. There are enemies lists that are floating around with our names on it. What do you say specifically about the role that journalism has in preserving democracy and being speaking truth to power in this moment?
Well, this speaks to your last segment, which I thought was excellent, because the reality is they want to create new information ecosystems that Americans live within. They want platforms like X to be these kind of turbocharged vehicles for conspiracy theory, for their version of reality. And then they want to try to silence people, investigative journalists, people that are doing the kind of work to expose corruption. They want to either discredit those people, intimidate those people, harass those people. If you look at what's happened again in other countries, which can be useful, because I'm sure that the Trump people have studied these types of tactics. Their investigations into people, their tax investigations, there's audits, there's just kind of pure harassment to make life more difficult. I think what has to happen is there has to be a kind of collective will among that Fourth Estate to report on the truth, to not be intimidated. There's going to have to probably be support for certain people that may be wrongfully accused of things. But the reality is, I also find everywhere I go, people want to understand what is happening. I think we have to not follow Trump, everything he says, everything he truths or tweets, he wants us to be talking about that kind of thing, the outrage of the day. We should not be talking about, this time around, Ali, if he draws with a Sharpie on a picture of a hurricane, that's not the main story. The main story is the fundamental corruption of our federal government for the interest of one person. And I think telling people the truth about what is happening, connecting dots for people, being very clear about what the stakes are, this is the kind of reporting and the kind of messaging that I think Americans are looking for right now to understand what is happening. And not the kind of tit for tat and back and forth in the political realm that Trump kind of thrives on, because that's what he wants to have the focus be on, that everybody's arguing, everybody's polarized. Maybe that means everybody's the same. Everybody's not the same here. Something very unusual in American history is happening, and people need to shine a light on it.
On November 8th, 3 days after the election, you wrote in an article that was titled, "I study guys like Trump. There's a reason they keep winning." You said Donald Trump has won the presidency, but I don't believe he will deliver on his promises. Like other self-interested autocrats, his remedies are designed to exploit problems instead of solving them, and he's surrounded by oligarchs who want to loot the system instead of reforming it. You identify the problem, but you actually think this might come in his way, that he's as likely to not be successful in some of these efforts as he is to be successful.
Yeah, well, I'll just give you a couple of examples. What are the two things that we hear probably more about than anything else that he wants to do? Mass deportation of undocumented people in this country, and tariffs, huge across-the-board tariffs on goods that are coming into this country. You have studied markets. Those are probably about the two most inflationary things that you can do. That is going to drive up costs in this country. And so if the reason he was elected is in large part, I think, dissatisfaction with cost of living in this country, the remedies he has for it, which are more about his ideological agenda, America first tariffs, America first deportations, those things are going to make the things that angered a lot of voters much worse. If he comes in and gives a massive tax cut to wealthy people, to billionaires and corporations in this country, those things are going to exacerbate the inequality that is part of what has made people lose faith in systems in this country. So the plans that he has are not going to remedy the injustices or the sense of grievance that a lot of people felt motivated by when they voted for him. And so that's why when I talk about not focusing on the crazy thing he says, focus on what he does. That's what we have to do this time around, because the things that he's going to be doing are going to be making the distrust in institutions and the sense of the future not being as hopeful as the past. He's going to make those dynamics worse. But rather than arguing about some crazy thing he says, we need to be focusing on what is he doing.
Good advice, my friend. Thank you for being with us this morning. Ben Rhodes is a former Deputy National Security Advisor. He's an MSNBC political contributor. He's the author of an important book, After the Fall, The Rise of Authoritarianism in the World We've Made. All right, coming up, more than unqualified, a pair of Trump cabinet picks are being seen even among some Republicans as dangerous to our nation's defense and intelligence apparatus. Why my next guest believes they can be stopped. And best-selling author Jodi Picoult's novel, 19 Minutes, was the most banned book of the last school year. She'll join us with a roadmap for fighting back and protecting the freedom to read. The Velshi Band Book Club is ahead.
Push 3, take.
I want our viewers to feel seen and heard. Suddenly they change the rules. I want them to feel like I'm their voice.
Dissolve.
So what they are screaming at their television, why isn't the media talking about this? Why aren't they asking that? The migrant issue. I'm hoping the way we approach the show, the questions we ask, are the same things you are asking your friends and family. But the question